and we will get on it. Looks like it's live on Facebook and almost on YouTube. So give me 1 second so I can see any questions you might have. And mute this. Looks like it's live. All right, good morning, everybody. And again, my name is Samantha Mirabal with Mocha's application team. And if you have questions, you can type them in on the comments on Facebook and we'll get those answered for you. You can always send emails in ahead of time to applications@melco.com and we will get them added to the next week's talk. So I have a few questions that were sent in ahead of time that we're going to start off with. So feel free to type in anything you might have. All right. So to start off with, first question was, does DesignShop have a function similar to macros in Windows programs where you can input a series of commands to one hotkey? Not currently. That is a feature I personally would love, because there's some things you do, it's so repetitive, it would be handy to have a keystroke to be able to perform a series of actions in a row. Now, there are some things you can do. There are specific gaming keyboards you can get that have a whole set of function keys that you can program to do whatever you want. So that would be an easy way. It's outside of the program. It's just a separate keyboard that you would get. So that's one way you can do it. Also, depending on what it is you're actually trying to do, you could look at Good Morning in Three Rivers. So another thing you could look at using, depending on what you're trying to address, is using styles. For instance, I like to change underlay and tie-off stitches on all my old files, or just in bulk to a whole bunch of different elements. So rather than having to select them all and then go in individually to change the ties and then to change the underlay, I set up a style to do that. So let me show you, just in case that is the scenario you're looking at. So if you go into DesignShop, I'm going to right click on lettering just to bring up the object property box. Down here you'll see where it says styles. If you click on styles, you'll see you can choose different ones. So ties and underlay is actually one that I made myself, and then you can change it to selection or project. If you set it to project, it'll apply all those settings to the entire project. If to just what you have selected, it'll apply that to just the selection. So you can come in to create styles and create it whatever you want and go through all the different settings, setting up your personal preferences. And that way if you're going through a project and now you want to do that bulk action, you can select everything and go change the style at once, and it'll apply to the entire thing. Okay, so that's one way. But if you're looking to actually do a series of different actions, tool objects, I don't know what actions you might want, you would be better off going and to get a keyboard that has the function keys that you can program. So that is one way to do it. All right, so there's no direct way within DesignShop. So another question came in: how do I change the color of a certain letter? Okay, so let's go back to DesignShop. I don't see any questions yet. All right, so the lettering tool is here. You can do Control T, you can go insert text, however you want. And see. All right, so if I'm gonna type my name and center it up. So now if I want to change the colors, notice the lettering by itself is here, right? Good morning, Rachel and Anita. If I click on the box, you'll see that each letter has a black X on it. Now that black X is what you can use to select each letter individually. What can you do with that? Well, of course you can move it around. Notice it'll let me move it only on the baseline. If I try to go up and down, it's not letting me. If I want to move it up and down, I have to hold the Control key. Okay, so by holding the Control key, you can do drop letters, things like that. You can also scale individual letters. If I hold the Shift key, make that bigger, whatever you're trying to do. The specific question was, well, how do I go change colors of individual things? All right, well, you first off click on the lettering, then click on the black X of the letter you want to affect, and then you come over here and give it a color. So if I want to make rainbow, red, orange, yellow, so I can give each letter a different color. See how that's working? And you'll notice on my project view over here, I now have 5 color changes. Good morning, everybody. So there you get that. Now there was a following question. Well, I'll get there in a minute. So I'll leave this open because that's not the next question. I was just looking. All right, and no questions typed in so far? All right, so that's how you change the color of individual letters. So the next question we had is if I have a circle and I want to put a border, I hold Shift Walk, it puts a walk stitch. That's great, except I want it to be further away. All right, 2 millimeters, that's 2 points, right? So here, let's go look at it. So I'm going to create a new file. If you've never drawn a circle, right here is your insert complex. And down here, there's a circle, automatic circle input. So I'm going to click on that, do a left click and a left click. And now notice it's dragging an oval. Now, if you want that to be a circle, hold the Shift key and that will lock it to a circle. Then I just click, now I have a circle. All right. So the question was, if I put a border on that, it's line to line, but I want it to be 2 points outside of it. So just to show you how that border works, if I hold my Shift key down on the keyboard, so select your shape, that's step 1. Step 2, hold your Shift key on the keyboard and then click on this walk input. And you'll notice now I have a complex and a walk, and I'm just going to make it another color. Well, not that you can see white. Let's try something else. Still can't see that. All right, I'll zoom in so you can actually see it. All right, so now I've got a circle with a red, but that's line to line. We want it to be offset by 2 points. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to take my filled circle and I'm going to copy and paste it, and then I'm just for grins I'm going to change it to red so I can see it. So now we need to offset it by those 2 points. So I'm going to go to, you can either go to Object, Offset Outline. I can right click, I can go to Operations, Offset Outline. It all gets you to the same spot. All right, so Offset Outline, I'm going to say 2 points. And 2 points is not a whole lot. Just so we can see it a little bit better, I'm going to offset it 22 points. There. Now you can see it's largely offset, not just 2. Oh wait, 2 points is not 2 millimeters. Ignore me. All right, so now that we have this offset, we are going to hold the Control key down and click. So Shift click just adds. Control click converts it. So Control click, now I've got a circle that's offset by 22 points. Okay, which is 2.2 millimeters. So I should have done that 20 points. That's what I get for not doing conversions. All right, so that's how you would get basically take your shape, duplicate it, do an offset. The offset only works on complex, so you can't just offset a walk to be offset larger. You have to make it a complex first and then convert it. Another way you can convert is by using this option. So if you forget that Control Shift trick, you can always click on this thing, and that gives you a way to think about it. So what are you trying to do? I'm trying to take my complex fill to a single line center, no, a bean stitch or a walk stitch. And do I want to replace it or add it? So replace, so get rid of that fill and make it just a bean stitch, or add. So that's what you would do. Okay. All right. So let's see, what else do we have? All right, so that's circles and borders. I apologize for the tiny graphic. I got it out of the manual and then blew it up and it's blurry. But anyway, is there a way to start embroidering at a different point of the text file instead of starting at the beginning and forwarding stitch by stitch? So this is specific. Let's say you're in the middle of a design, you're sewing something out, and for whatever reason you cancel the job, reset it, and now you want to move to stitch 2000 or whatever. Do you really have to sit there and hold forward until it's moving by itself and just wait until it gets to 2000? No. If you go to Tool in the OS, this is nothing to do with DesignShop, so this is at the machine. In the Melco OS, Bravo OS, whatever Bernina OS, whatever operating system you're using, you're going to go to Tools, Settings, and then here you'll see there's a Move tab. So if you click on that, down here you can type, which stitch number you want to go to. So let's say you want to move to stitch 2203. You could type 2203, move to stitch, wait till the machine moves, hit OK. All right, so that will move you to your next position. Now, another way you could do that, actually, so what if you don't know what stitch number you want to move to, but you know you want to go to a certain point? Well, if I come, let's say I'm back on those letters, and let's say I want to go to the letter T, all right, and I don't know which stitch number that is. Well, if I open a Design Shop, I can go click on the T, and up here, see this expanded editing mode? That will show the stitches. So now I can click on an individual stitch. So let's say that's about where I want to be. So if I click on it, notice it puts that little marker thing. I don't know what it's called technically. I just call it an X. But anyway, that thing right there will show up on what stitch you have selected. So if you click on stitches, which is in the you have the project view, then you have the stitch view, that will show you which stitch number that is. So that's stitch 3955. So that'll give you the stitch to go to. So like that's underlay stitch right there. It's 3747. So that works wherever you click. Notice anytime I click on a stitch, it'll put a marker and show me what stitch number that is. So you do that within Design Shop if you don't know which stitch you want to go to. Okay, this will at least help get you close, so then you can dial it in using the forward or back buttons on your keypad. Okay, and if you don't want to see all these little dots all over the place, you can turn off the expanded editing mode right there. And then to get back to your project view, just click on that. Okay, a question was typed in. I have a question. If I have a hat design, how can I change that to a left chest design? I know a lot of people just sew hat designs straight out as left chest because they're set hat designs so bottom to top, center out. Depending on your garment, that would work just fine. In general, it really depends on how you want it to sew out for the left chest. It's not a bad practice anyway, I don't think. Someone else might have a different opinion, to sew center out. So it's if you want it to sew from left to right or top to bottom or something like that, you'd have to redigitize it. There's no magic button to go click and poof, it will do something else. You would actually have to redigitize it to go in the order you want it to sew at. Okay. Most digitizers also, if you ask them for both, they'll give you both. Sometimes they charge a little more for that. Actually, I think most do. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Okay, so that was forwarding. So in the OS, tools, settings, move, tell it to go to stitch, move to stitch. If there's a trick on the keypad, you can hold needles up, needles down. So needles is a top button on the far right. That's the three little needle looking things. If you click that one and then hold arrow up, or click arrow up or arrow down, arrow up goes to the next color change, arrow down will go to the previous color change. So that's the same thing as moving to color number, but it just does increments of one. It'll go to the next one as many times as you click it, or back the same way. So anyway, that's fun. There was a question, can we explain actifeed and when you would want to make it lower, higher, why? So first off, I just kind of broke this up so I could talk to it. What is actifeed? So actifeed really is just a different tensioning system. If you look at the older, the traditional tensioning system, it's a bunch of discs and pre-tensioners. And I used to run one of a traditional tension system. And if I never have to mess with tension dials again, I'm a happy camper. So basically, you would run threads through this. You got to play with the little knobs to balance your tension between the bobbin and the top. And it's not something I enjoy doing. I know some people love it, but that's not my idea of a good time. So what the actifeed does is it takes all of that tensioning system, which is all manual and kind of an art, if you will, and it turns it into a gear-driven rollers thread bar sensor that is sensing the stitches and feeding how much thread you need to make the stitch, right? So the software is going, all right, my stitch from here to here has a stitch length of that. I'm going through a material that's a certain thickness. Therefore, I need an inch of thread, or however much thread it needs to make that particular stitch, okay? Someone did put a link there to a video that you can watch on actifeed. All right, so that's kind of going from what I'd say legacy type tensioning to newer, more modern tensioning system, right? So what the actifeed number, so you know how there's numbers on there, you'll set the actifeed to anywhere from 1 to 40 usually. That's actually this number right here. So it's the material thickness, right? So if you just look at how a stitch is made from needle penetration to needle penetration, what is it? Well, you've got the top thread that's going around, and then you have the bottom thread. So you have the length needed to make the stitch, how much is going through the actual material, how much needs to be on the back. All right. This material thickness is measured in points, which is 1/10 of a millimeter. So if you're just thinking about actifeed, the higher the number, that means the more thread it's going to push, because it's assuming this thickness is thicker. So it needs more thread to be able to form that entire stitch. The lower that number is, the smaller this is, so the tighter the thread's going to be. So if you're used to traditional tensioning systems, I find it's really easy for most people to think, you know, the higher the number, the looser the tension, the smaller the number, the tighter the tension. If you're not familiar with those and never messed with them, just what that really is, it's looking at the different thicknesses of your materials. All right. So the actifeed is broken up into two parts. You got standard and auto. Standard is where you're just telling it, I only want you to feed a set amount. Don't make it go more thread, not less thread. Just give me the thread I program in with this number. All right. So it's only going to give you a very specific amount of thread for each stitch. All right. Whereas auto is looking at that thread sensor on the front, and it's at the thread conditions and the sewing conditions of your garment, and it's automatically going to adjust how much thread is pushing out to make each stitch. So if you've ever noticed these charts here, how it kind of bounces around, that's telling you it's not holding it constant. You're getting a little more thread, then a little less thread, a little more, and it's moving around based on what the sensor is seeing for the sewing conditions. All right. So the original question, now that I've talked too much, is can you explain actifeed and why would I want it higher or lower? These are just starting numbers for you. I pulled this out of the manual. You would want an actifeed to be higher for thicker materials. So let's say you pick a number. Let's say you're sewing on a t-shirt and you start at 7 with a cutaway backing, right? And you're looking at it, how it's sewing, and you're thinking it looks too pulled into the material. It's too tight. Okay, well maybe you need it to be more thread. So that means you'd move your actifeed number up so it's not pulling down as much, right? So you get a little more thread on top. All right, so that'll give more thread. Now, this is all my discussion here is assuming you have bobbin tension set appropriately. All right, so if your bobbin tension is completely off, that's not good. So make sure your bobbin tension is appropriate for whatever machine and software you're using. That's very important. All right, but in general, the thicker your material is, the higher, and let's say you add a whole bunch of backing, you're sewing on 2 layers of 3-ounce cutaway, and you've got a hoodie, so one of those real thick garments, you're going to need a higher actifeed than if I were sewing on a handkerchief, all right, with a tearaway. So it's really looking at thickness of material. I mean, I guess you could get calipers out and measure stuff. I don't do that. I just start with a number, look at how it's sewing, and decide from there. And what you'll find is as you do stuff, take notes. You'll find what you like and what works good for different garments. Another question came in. I'm looking real quick. I don't see any others. Okay, so can we go over curve compensation? So curve compensation is in the properties. So if you go to object properties, you'll notice this is that there's, for the walk, down here you'll see there's a curve compensation button. So what curve compensation is doing, if you look, well, let's just move back a second and look at just making stitches, right? I can't curve that thread right there. I'm literally going to make a needle penetration here and a needle penetration there, and it's going to drag the piece of thread, right? So if it's dragging the piece of thread, that's giving me, it's 2 points, it's a straight line, right? So when I'm going around curves, I have to approximate that with straight lines to make it look like a curve when in reality it's just a bunch of tiny straight lines. So what curve compensation does is it adjusts the stitch length rather than keeping them all constant at 20 points or however many points you have set for the walk. And it's going to better approximate it by adding some smaller stitches in there so that it will look more rounded versus like a nice little point there. Okay, so without curve compensation, you'll end up with curves not looking as clean of a curve as if you put on the curve compensation. Okay, so this is just in the object properties. If you click on, right click on the walk, and then right here under the walk tab, you'll see there's a retrace or a curve compensation. So all my question relates to only digitize center out. It doesn't matter that the hacknet thickness. Okay, so this is back to the hack question of redigitizing, whether you're sewing on a hat or a garment. It's the stabilizers aren't going to be a real big problem. Sometimes what you'll find is, depending on who's digitizing it, you may have either too much or too little underlay for going into a different garment type. So that's the main, center out doesn't hurt anything. The different underlays, you might want to lighten it up if you're going into a performance polo, something that's really lightweight. You don't want to hammer it to death with a million stitches. So in those cases, you would want to go in and either adjust the underlays yourself to be more appropriate to the garment, or go look at, ask your digitizer if they can give you a different, depending on how you're doing it. It's simple enough to change, but this, to me, it's more about what's more appropriate for the weight of the garment. If you've got something really heavy, it's going to be fine regardless. So it's, the best thing you could do is try it, right? So let's say I was doing a one style polo shirt. I bought an extra and scrapped it, and then I didn't really care about the color. I did a test design, because you always want to do your test design sewing on the exact same garment type of fabric and the same stabilizers you want to use for production. Because if you sew it just in stabilizer, you're not going to see how the fabric's affected. So sew it on there, and then you make any adjustments. Well, that scrap garment I put aside, and next time someone orders, that same shirt, I grab the shirt that already had the one logo, or however many times I had to test it, and I just move it to a different spot and test it out. That way you'll start to, you can fit 50 different stitch outs on one shirt if you're judicious with how you hoop it. And that way you're not scrapping a garment with every order you get. Diana, I'll check with the guys and see if they have any other guidance, but the biggest thing I could think is underlay. I see lots of people using hat designs on shirts, and the biggest issue I've noticed is it just being too many stitches. But they seem to sew out well, and I always go off of how does it sew out. If I like it, great. If not, I change it. I guess that's probably not the best way to do it, but I always try it, and I'd make adjustments accordingly. All right. Are there any other questions? Because those are the only ones I had typed in. Let's see. Let me scroll through the comments real quick. Good morning, everybody. Okay. Well, I don't see any other comments typed in, so I'll hold for just a little bit longer, and if call it a night, or call it a day. All right, Diana. Yeah, if I hear anything else, I'll either type it in here or add it to next week's talk too, or maybe both. So I'll check with the guys just to see if there's anything I'm missing here, but all right. Well, I remember to sending your questions to applications@melco.com. You can type them in when the post usually goes up Wednesday or so. Type in whatever questions you have, and we'll get them added to the list. I know I try to post in the groups on Thursday or Friday just to, troll for questions, see if I can get anything answered for y'all. What software do I use to transfer graphics to DesignShop? Personally, I use a little bit of everything. Illustrator is predominantly what I use. I will create vector art in Illustrator, and then copy it from there, open up DesignShop and paste it in. That's just, why do I use Illustrator? Just because I'm comfortable with it. I know people use Corel. There's a lot of softwares out there to use. I only use Illustrator because I have it. I've used it for a long time. Any other questions? No? All right, everybody. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, and I will talk to you guys next week, maybe with less of a sunburn.